Good morning. I'm Marissa Khurman. I'm the director of the Middle East program here at the Wilson Center. Welcome to today's panel discussion, Untapped Potential Women, Leadership, and Water Diplomacy in the Middle East, co-hosted by the Wilson Center's Environmental Change and Security Program and the Middle East program, and co-sponsored by our colleagues EcoPeace Middle East. Last year, the Middle East program published a flagship report focusing on women in leadership in the region's public sector. The report examined the women leadership deficit we see across sectors, not only in the executive branch, but also in the legislative and judicial branches. It also assessed both inhibitors and enablers for women to reach the high table, as well as how much decision-making power they have once they are leaders in government. For example, women are often seen heading ministries that are often referred to as feminine portfolios, such as culture, education, and social development. And while those are very important functions, they're not seen as the key ministries in government. And this brings us to today's discussion on women leadership and water diplomacy. Once again, we see women playing a critical role in water resource management and decision-making at the family level as well as the community level. However, they're very often absent from high-level water-related negotiations and agreements. And this is a region, the Middle East, that continues to be one of the most water insecure worldwide. So this panel aims to address the why. Why is it that women are absent from this high table in water diplomacy, and the how? How can the region's leaders ensure that more women are better represented in water diplomacy? To answer these questions is a stellar panel of women leaders in this sector from the region. So we look forward to this discussion. My colleague, Lauren Hertzer-Risi, Director of the Environmental Change and Security Program, will moderate today's discussion. Lauren has been heading this program from a number of years, connecting issues at the intersection of environment, health, and security to foreign policy and development. I also encourage you to check out the New Security Beat blog, which is run by ECSP and tackles many of these issues that ECSP is known to lead. Lauren, the Zoom floor is yours to kick us off.
Thank you for that great introduction, Marissa. I have to say, one of the best parts of my job is working with the Wilson Center's regional programs, like the Middle East program, to do these deep country and regional dives into the intersection of issues that ECSP focuses on. One of the other best parts of my job is working with our partners and friends around the world, like those on our panel today, who are working to better understand, communicate, and demonstrate the connections between natural resources, governance, and human security. I want to add my thanks to our friends at EcoPeace for their collaboration on today's event, not to mention the last 25 years of partnership between our institutions. Women in water diplomacy is not an issue specific to the Middle East, but there are a lot of lessons to be learned from the region. And women in diplomacy is not an issue specific to water, but the process of making decisions about water resources through cooperative and diplomatic efforts to manage shared water can provide an entry point for more inclusive representation and decision making. And we know that inclusive decision making is more effective decision making. In short, making sure that women are in decision-making positions in the water sector is not about including women for women's sake, it's about including women for everyone's sake. And today, it's my privilege to introduce this extraordinary panel of women who are true leaders in this space. We're going to hear first from Maysoon Al-Zubi on what changes when you have women in the highest levels of decision making. Maysoon is an expert in the water sector who has extensive experience in policy analysis, economic development, and diplomacy. Until recently, Maysoon was a Secretary General of Jordan's Higher Population Council. She has served as Secretary General of the Jordan Ministry of Water and Irrigation and was a senior policy analyst in the Hashemite Royal Court's Economic Affairs Department. Next, following Maysoon, we'll hear from Natasha Karmi, who will share the findings from a multi-year comparative study of women in water diplomacy in the MENA region. Natasha has worked for more than 20 years on water resources and environmental challenges in the Middle East from diverse perspectives, including the private sector, development agencies, and civil society. Currently, she is the lead water specialist at the Geneva Water Hub, where she's helped to establish the Global Water Observatory on Water and Peace, as well as the Women, Water and Peace Agenda. She's worked as a policy advisor on water, environment, and agriculture for the Palestinian Negotiation Support Project and has extensive experience in bilateral and regional water negotiations. Following Natasha, we hear from Dalit Wolf-Golan. Dalit is the Deputy Israeli Director and Regional Development Director at EcoPeace Middle East, where she contributes to environmental sustainability and helps to amplify how Israelis, Palestinians, and Jordanians' national destinies and self-interest are inextricably linked to their environment and thus to each other. EcoPeace Middle East is a true leader in environmental peace building, and through Dalit and her colleagues' efforts, EcoPeace helps communities across Israel, Palestine, and Jordan to reach out across conflict lines to change policies and advance solutions to pressing environmental concerns. And finally, we'll hear from Martina Klimes on the role of external actors in encouraging women in water diplomacy. What do third-party actors with good intentions get wrong, and what do they get right? Martina is the advisor for water and peace at the Stockholm International Water Institute, where she is responsible for the water and peace portfolio, in addition to advising on seaweed's activities in transboundary basins affected by water scarcity, political tensions, and armed violence. Martina is currently a member of the World Water Week Scientific Program Committee an associated research fellow at the Institute for Security and Development in Stockholm. We've told each of our panelists to keep their initial comments to the 7 to 8 minute range, and I'm going to be a bit ruthless about keeping us to time to allow for deeper discussion and time for Q&A with the audience. I've also encouraged the panel to ask questions and provide follow-ups to one another's comments in the discussion following their remarks. We will reserve the last 15 or 20 minutes for Q&A with the audience, so please feel free to email your questions for the discussion to ecsp@wilsoncenter.org. Please indicate your name, title, and affiliation in the question. The email is also listed below the video where you're watching this webcast. So again, I'll say it, it's ecsp@wilsoncenter.org, but you can also see it there on the webpage. With that, I'll turn it over to Maysoon. Thank you so much. Oh, sorry, Maysoon, you're going to have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, sorry. I would like to thank you for giving me this chance to participate in this important event. And I always appreciating the important work being carried out to enable women participation, decision-making, peace building, conflict prevention, anything for women. I always this. So around the world, women lack representation in government, especially in high level executive and legislation bodies limit their ability to influence government policy and governance. So in my personal opinion, in order to enable women to participate in the peace building process, we must enable them to reach decision-making positions, as these type of tasks most of the time in most of the country, they carried out only by the public sector and at a highest level of decision-making. I was one of the few who managed to gain access to decision-making process position, as I was the Secretary General for Ministry of Water and Irrigation, which allowed me to participate in the negotiation of regional water agreements. Thus, I was able to prove the capabilities of women in leading these missions and reaching important decisions. I was, by virtue of my position, the head of the Jordan-Israeli Joint Water Committee, and I was also the head of the Jordanian delegation negotiating the famous Red to Dead project, where I was at that time able to convince the Palestinian and the Israeli delegation to approve the technical studies of the project, and with this end a long stage of negotiation and come up with a historic decision signed by all parties. And at that time, we informed the World Bank of the finalization of this study, and to start the preparation for the implementation stage. This was the beginning for me. This experience of mine increased my conviction of the importance of water diplomacy as a tool for stopping wars and spreading peace among people. Then I participated and still in another initiative called Blue Peace in the Middle East, which calls for also considering cooperation between countries as an effective tool for spreading peace. Last year, we celebrated the 10th anniversary of this initiative full of successes. And today, I also part of our member in another initiative, empowering women in water diplomacy in the Middle East and North Africa, where my colleague Natasha will talk about this in more detail. So I'd like here, when I'm sitting here, I like to talk more about this Middle East, Blue Peace in the Middle East. This initiative was initially established in 2011, has formed a Blue Peace community for community of champions of regional water, transboundary regional water cooperation in the Middle East, beginning with a handful of experts. And in 2010, then the community has expanded to include more than 200 policymakers served as ex-ministers in the country who are member in this initiative, and also senior government officials, member of parliaments, media leaders, scientists, and experts. This initiative at the time when multiple conflict, and we started 2010 and we passed this Arab Spring, and you see how it was. The situation is very difficult, but this initiative still exists and passed and in the region, and it's emerged as a soft infrastructure of dialogue in the Middle East. Since January 2019, the initiative is led now by collective leadership representative from Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, Turkey, Iran, and to more limited degree, Syria. I will not talk about the other initiative because Natasha will talk about this in more detail, but I'd like to tell some selective milestone for women political representation in the Middle East. So to show others, we have a very good women and they serve in a very good positions. So in 2011, Buthaina Kamel became the first woman to run for presidents in Egypt. 2011, Saudi Arabia became the last country in the world to recognize women's right to vote after Oman, Qatar, Kuwait, and UAE. In 2014, Iraq adopted the region's first national action plan in support of UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security, followed by Jordan, Tunisia, Lebanon, and Yemen. 2015, the UAE elected Dr. Amal Al-Qubaisi, Speaker of Federal National Council, the first woman to serve as a Speaker of legislative body in the Arab world. 2018, Sarwa Abdel Wahid became the first woman to run for president in Iraq. In January 2019, Lebanon Raya Al-Hassan was appointed the first interior minister in the Arab world. February 2019, Princess Rima bint Bandar Al Saud became the first female ambassador to represent Saudi Arabia. And in January 2020, Lebanon's Zaina Akar Badra became the first female Minister of Defense in the Arab world. So we have some champion, we have role model, but the road is still long, but by keeping on working on this, and with Natasha, she will tell with this study, this will give us like a roadmap how we can help women to reach this position. I will stop here and then maybe later we can talk or reply to your question. Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you, Maysoon. I definitely have some follow-ups, and you kept your comments very tight, so I'm tempted to start now by asking you questions, but I think we'll stick to the schedule, and I'll come back to you at the end. Let's see. Next, we're going to hear from Natasha.
Okay. Well, first, a big thank you for Marissa and for Lauren for inviting me to really be part of this very interesting and dynamic discussion. And thank you for Maysoon for actually setting the scene and for existing women champions in the region. For the other participants, I mean, good morning, good afternoon, for taking interest in this topic. In my intervention today, I will focus on two key elements. I will share the results of the comparative study on the empowerment of women in water diplomacy in the MENA region that Maysoon has referred to, how it came about, how it developed from a first mapping to a comparative study, and then proudly to an initiative. And I will also share reflections on existing options to enhance these leadership opportunities within the framework of the elements of the water and peace discourse. Often, the question, especially when we talk about the initiative, and I think, Maysoon and the other co-authors, often we are asked the question, why women and water diplomacy? And from my perspective as a practitioner in the field, I find that the actual question that should be asked is how can water diplomacy actually be more effective with the inclusion of all stakeholders, mainly women? When I was looking actually through the list of the participants that was shared with us, I saw that there are some diplomats with us today. So I assume that many of you can actually relate to this increased global recognition of the role of preventive diplomacy. And I'm sure that some of these diplomats have or are probably practicing one form of specialized preventive diplomacy, possibly water diplomacy. One of the milestones actually was in 2017, when the UN Security Council actually held a briefing on preventive diplomacy and transboundary waters, emphasizing the role of water diplomacy and cooperation in conflict prevention. A couple of years earlier, the EU Foreign Affairs Council had actually walked down this path and had adopted new conclusions on EU water diplomacy. In the meantime, the water peace discourse has developed through three key initiatives. That was the first of which was mentioned by Maysoon, and I will briefly mention the other two. The adoption of international water law principles by states has actually enhanced the entry into force and globalization of the two key water conventions. Of course, as all of you know, then the adoption of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on women and peace and security was a landmark. And for those of us who are also working on the Sustainable Development Goals and the attainment of the Agenda 2030, we all know that without these possible linkages, we will not be able to attain our objectives. And the key SDGs that we are interested in today are women, water, and gender. And finally, albeit baby steps, yet on a positive note, there is more research into the merits of women negotiators. And it is exactly, all of these positive developments within the past decade with these frameworks and global developments that have encouraged Maysoon, myself, and our third co-leader, Mail Sayer, to conduct a first mapping exercise in Jordan, Palestine, and Lebanon in 2017, which is really the seed of the work that I will present. And it is really based on a personal story of the three of us who met professionally as one of the few women in the field of water diplomacy and blue peace at the time. We shared very similar challenges, but most importantly, we actually shared this similar commitment to be agents of change for the region. We were gladly joined by Tahani, Sharafat, and Anthi in 2020 through a joint collaboration between the Geneva Water Hub and the GWP Med, which expanded the mapping to Egypt, Morocco, and produced the comparative study. Just a few words on our collective approach. While we actually do recognize all of the social, political, and institutional challenges to the advancement of women, we do emphasize that it is incumbent on all members of society to support women empowerment. The basis of our work is that acquiring the skills that are needed for a good water diplomat would actually provide more opportunities for women. And from our point of view, women should naturally be at the table of negotiations and decision makings, for the one reason that this is the only way that we could ensure that these negotiations will be successful, inclusive, sustainable, and forward-looking. Briefly, the comparative study included 4 chapters. A first basic baseline review of all of the existing legal and the policy frameworks within each country, a mapping, a profile baseline of all the women, around 93 female water experts that participated in the questionnaire, a comparative analysis of the main areas that the questionnaire was formulated to ascertain to try to identify commonalities and specificities of skills that are needed in these 5 countries. And finally, a chapter that looks into what makes a good water diplomat. All of this work has actually been based on a short questionnaire that was formulated to provide specific insights into 4 main areas. What is the current status of these women? What are the main bottlenecks that hold them back? What are their perceptions in terms of the role of water diplomacy? And what are the linkages between SDG 6 and SDG 5? Due to the limited time, I will only share with you some glimpses of these results and encourage you to read the full report if interested on the websites of both the Geneva Water Hub and the GWP Med. This first slide actually summarizes the profile of the respondents in terms of education and experience. Be it in the table format or the chart, it is actually in line with the findings of the report that Marissa had mentioned that was conducted by the Wilson Center, which confirms that women in those 5 MENA countries do not lack either the education or the experience to be in decision-making positions in the public sector. It is really hard, to accept the claim that there is a lack of female expertise when within those 5 countries, we have at least 50% of the women that participated. They either hold a master's or a PhD degree and have significant experience. This second slide actually reflects one of the areas of the comparative analysis, which looked into the factors that influence the decision to accept or reject a decision-making position. The 2 main factors that scored the highest were actually the lack of support from peers and the lack of opportunities. Within the factors, we had actually also included the lack of comprehensive skills. So the next area of analysis was actually to try to unpack what are these comprehensive skills that the respondents feel they need to develop and acquire. The 2 that scored the highest were mainly diplomacy and international skills and a better knowledge of related legal instruments. So what next? With our partner, GWP Med, and through the initiative, we are seeking to secure financing for a 3-year mentorship and capacity building program for up to 50 of the women of the informal network that has been created through these 2 mapping exercises. In the meantime, we are continuing the discussion with these women through a monthly 60-minute Q&A with key experts. On another level, and going back, the second element, to conclude, basically, the elements of the water peace discourse, which I had mentioned, provides opportunities through the different initiatives, the Blue Peace Movement, the Global High-Level Panel on Water and Peace, and the implementation of its recommendations by the Geneva Water Hub and its partners. In terms of concrete actions, we are going to conduct more research into women leaders in transboundary water cooperation and negotiations. We will strengthen the voice of women as a societal node of the Global Observatory on Water and Peace, and we will assist in engendering platforms of art and media to include more the voice of women. And I think with here, I can pass on the floor back to you, Lauren. Thank you for listening, and I look forward for your discussions.
Thank you, Natasha. That was a really wonderful and concise overview. I'm very impressed so far with our panelists, and they're sticking to time today. It's my pleasure now to hand the Zoom floor over to Dalit for her presentation.
Here we go. Okay, hi. So I'm Dalit Wolf, and thank you for inviting me to join this panel of really extraordinary women to talk about women leadership in water diplomacy in the Middle East. My connection to this issue is through my work at EcoPeace Middle East. I joined EcoPeace 4 years ago and found a unique organization of Israelis, Palestinians, and Jordanians working together to promote peace and to protect our shared environment. As you can imagine, the realities in our three countries, in Jordan, Israel, and Palestine, are very different, but we all share a common denominator, which is our concern about water. The Middle East is the most water-scarce, conflict-ridden region on the planet, and the climate crisis is making a problematic situation even more desperate. As you have heard here from Maysoon and Natasha, water problems particularly affect women. And yes, women are often shut out from the process of solving them. Women are underrepresented in the water sector, in local municipal councils, and their needs and viewpoints are underrepresented in the political process. We believe that women and girls should have the opportunity to advance solutions to water security issues that affect their lives, their families, and their communities. Our approach to this is one of gender mainstreaming. Most of our programs do not target women specifically, but all of our programs recruit at least 50% female participants, provide training to reduce barriers to civil engagement and increase political participation, and feature women speakers and experts as role models. This approach also extends to our organization itself. And I'd like to start showing you some pictures. This is our team. We are about 50 staff working out of 3 offices in Ramallah, Amman, and Tel Aviv. 2 out of EcoPita's country directors today are women. Half our management team and half our board are women. The rest of the staff also, at least half are women, and all our teams include not only staff representing each of our 3 offices, but also a healthy gender diversity. As you can see from this picture of EcoPita's founding days, this wasn't always the case. And this diversity also expands to our approach and strategy. EcoPita creates a framework for peace and advances water and climate security by creating shared solutions in key areas such as water, energy, investment, and education, combining bottom-up community-based actions and education with top-down advocacy and research. Our bottom-up activities encourage young people to become knowledgeable about the transboundary nature of the environmental challenges in our region, develop innovative thinking about ways to resolve local and regional environmental problems, and use tools such as diplomacy and technology to implement hands-on projects. In Israel, we helped develop a water diplomacy program in high schools, the only water diplomacy program that is being taught in high schools anywhere in the world as far as we know. Here you can see kids who are participating in our program passionately debating transboundary water issues in a Model UN event about water that they organized themselves in their school. Our Palestinian and Jordanian school program too deals with environmental topics in a way that is relevant to youth's own communities and local context. And this creates impact wherever the program takes place. For example, one of the school teachers in Bethlehem, after receiving our teacher training, became one of the strongest advocates for addressing local water pollution issues in her community. Kids too start to develop projects like cleanups, recycling projects, and petitions that in turn create a ripple effect in their communities. Besides these national school programs in Jordan, Palestine, and Israel that take place as part of the regular school curriculum and are offered in public high schools to thousands of youth, we also identify and train emerging young leaders in regional cross-border programs. We work with youth ages 16 to 18. We call them youth water trustees. They meet each other at regional camps in Jordan, participate in trainings, and develop environmental projects together. We also work with young professionals in the early stages of their careers, offering them national and regional workshops on water and environmental issues, practical diplomacy, and negotiation skills, culminating in joint regional projects in trilateral teams. This program, now in its 2nd year, is already extremely successful. We select only 20 participants in each country among a pool of hundreds and hundreds of applicants. Here you can see Roy and Marina from the first cohort of Israeli water diplomats last year. Roy's team came up with a winning project for a documentary movie about the Jordan River, which is currently being developed and has since already raised thousands of dollars. Both Roy and Marina have meanwhile been recruited as Ecopeace staff and are running their own projects, their own Ecopeace project. Roy is actually now leading the program he joined as a participant and establishing a regional forum of influencers that will meet regularly. Marina is leading the Israeli side of a new program for green social entrepreneurship that aims to advance innovative green enterprises and create a network of young Israeli, Jordanian, and Palestinian entrepreneurs. But searching back to our original question, how do these and our other programs promote women leadership in water diplomacy in our region? And the answer to that is, above all, participation. We need to make sure that we remove barriers that would prevent women from joining these activities. That can mean assisting with transportation, scheduling meetings during times that mothers will help with childcare, preserving cultural sensitivities, and more. And this, by the way, should be mirrored throughout the organization. We need women leadership as well inside the organizational culture, and a culture that values a work-life balance and a diversity of perspectives. Here, in fact, much credit is due to state funders, especially the US, Canada, and Sweden, who have made an enormous contribution to promote gender-sensitive program design among civil society organizations, both by setting the standard and by creating awareness and knowledge around this issue. In this picture, you can see a gender mainstreaming workshop I participated in Amman a few years ago that was organized by the Swedish Development Agency for its partner agencies to help organizations like us learn from each other's experience and get the tools to really walk the talk. And this essentially means setting targets for the participation of women and, just as important, collecting data about our programs that is gender desegregated. But not only that, it also means going beyond the numbers and getting into the habit of doing gender mapping and gender analysis to really see and address the gaps where they are as they are. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dalit. And last but not least, we're going to hear from Martina.
Thank you very much, Lauren, and thank you for all my fellow panelists. It's really so inspirational to listening to all these friends and colleagues, and to hear about all the amazing progress that has been done. I found it really striking to see that photo from the beginning of Ecopeace, and it was just men. And then if we look where we are now, it's an amazing success. And then similar photos can still be seen from different transboundary negotiations. I think we have this program at CB that we lead women of water diplomacy in the Nile. And then when the network members share photos from the different rounds of negotiations on Nile, it's usually very, very few women. And I do hope that in the future, of course, that this will also change. But what I would like to talk here in this panel is really to think about what external actors can do and what so-called third parties can do, how they can work with these issues and how can they contribute to improvement in increasing inclusion and participation of women and also youth in these processes. But first, I would like to reflect on the fact that water diplomacy, it's a multidisciplinary field. Water diplomacy, we see it as a process that can serve as a dialogue entry point on water issues when there is several actors who share the water resource. And it's a process for establishing cooperation. And very important is to realize that we do have the track 1, the formal processes, but we also have different processes, track 1.5 and tracks 2, that create this enabling environment that help to foster relations around water among different communities and different sectors. And I think for external actors, when they are getting involved into a new basin, it's really essential to do a thorough stakeholder mapping and to understand who is who in the different sectors, who is who in the different tracks, and not to simply only focus on the numbers, not to only start counting women. We have this many women in this one negotiation track, and we have this many women there. It's really not way forward to be very effective this way, because we cannot really expect that women will always carry on the women agenda. It's very important, as many of my fellow panelists mentioned, that the gender aspect is really seen across everyone. We really need to also work with male champions on all these different levels and in these all different tracks, both on the track ones. And we see that in every government, there can be some male champion who really does understand the importance of inclusion and gender, and who creates this much needed space for women. And of course, that women also do need assistance or need help with taking that space, but I would really like to say that equally important is that men do understand how essential it is to include women in these processes, both on this track one, but also in these tracks which support the enabling environment that is working with academia, working with media, working with different youth groups, working with other interest groups who are really helping us understand how do we create benefits from cooperating over shared water resources. So inclusivity is very important in all tracks. And then when an external actor comes, and there are different roles for an external party. External party can play a role as a dialogue facilitator. And if we look at these global numbers, there is a UN study that shows there is still a very, very few women who are involved. I think the recent number was only 30% of women were the women mediators in different processes. So if we also look at these numbers, there is still so much room for improvement. Sometimes when we come and when a Western third party comes to a region, they carry on this more traditional Western construct of these approaches, and they forget to really localize the issue. And that is something that I learned in one of the processes, that we actually had many women involved, and the way how we carried forward the gender agenda did not really find the right home with the local stakeholders, because it was done really without fully understanding the local context and really fully understanding the already established accomplishments of the women, and really not recognizing the immense work that has already been done. So I think it's extremely important for any external actor to fully understand the local context and fully work on a genuine local ownership, to really fully not to have this as something that is imported from externally imported, but that is really looking into what is already on the ground, really working with women who already are in these positions and seeing how can I support these women to really get into leadership positions? How can I really be engaged without causing harm? And how can I really be engaged with respect of the local context? And really create something that can be sustainable. And then when this can, of course, be sometimes an external actor can play a good, important role in requesting more women to be involved. But again, it is not really about counting the number of women. We see many peace processes which have women in leadership positions, but these women are not there because they carry on the women's agenda. They are there because they are daughters of their fathers. They represent certain families. They represent certain clans. And it's not really gender issues. It's really about the power dynamics within a specific country, for example. So I think it is also very important to recognize this, and not only to stick to counting the number of women involved in different processes, but really looking into who represents who represents which interest, who is at the table, who should be at the table, and really understanding, if we are an external actor, do I understand fully the local context? Do I fully understand the local dynamics? And how can I support the local women? How can I support the women who work already in these institutions and do something that actually is beneficial, not really imposing something from the outside that may not work in the local context. And so in addition to mapping the environment, understanding really who is who, identify possible male champions who can really help to support these processes and help to support the women advancing in their positions and going to leadership position. Then it's really important to think who carries forward the gender agenda and how do we distinguish this. As said, Sweden, of course, it's very proud to carry forward the feminist foreign policy, in which Sweden focuses on supporting different initiatives and really highlighting the issue of women and really helping to reframe certain situation, and also understanding sustainability of processes, understanding that women, it's 50% of population, women often are representing very important local processes. Important to realize that we have a lot of examples on local levels when women are involved in resolving local disputes. We have many cases from other parts of the world, not Europe, but we have many examples from different parts of Asia, different parts of Africa, when women play instrumental roles as mediators in local context. And I think it's important for external actors to really highlight these and share these important stories and create these experience sharing opportunities and highlight the role of the women who already achieve this success, because often we don't hear about this. Often, sometimes it feels this is a fairly Western dominated agenda in some aspects. Somebody may perceive this, and I would really like to hear the views of my fellow panelists. What do they think about this? Because for us, when we come, we really focus on the aspects of experience sharing, really bringing women together so they can share experience, they can empower each other, rather than empowering someone externally, because that is not something that we see as something sustainable. So I would stop here, and I would really like to hear from my fellow panelists if they have time to really help me answer this question.
That's great. Thank you very much, Martina. You made my job easy. Recognizing that unfortunately Maysoon is going to have to leave us in just a few minutes, so I'm going to turn to her first. And Maysoon, hopefully you heard Martina's question at the end there. And I also wanted to take advantage of you being with us today, noting sort of the depth of the expertise that you have, but also the positions that you've held and having sort of been a unique woman in this space. If you can share examples from your experience or illustrations of how women's participation has changed the outcome of a negotiation or sort of a decision-making process. And if you've been able to use those examples, sort of getting at what Martina was speaking about, to encourage sort of further advancement of women in the field.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. Yeah, yes, I do believe what Martina said. Yani, we can have everybody on board at different level. It shouldn't be, and I'm with you with the track. But you know, in the reality, the government. I don't know. I'm speaking about Jordan in particular. In reality, you have to be in the government high level in order to negotiate. Even though we don't have like a track 2 and track 3 until now, although they are very important, and I do always believe with this participatory approach. Yes, I will tell you, I participated in the negotiation, like I told you, about the right to death, and Natasha was with also the Palestinian delegation, and believe me, it was, we were very distinguished, not because I'm talking about me, but women, and I do believe in women capability, but the idea of ending this studies, because we spent ages, like years, negotiating who is the party, who's not the party, and we're waiting, we're at Jordan, we're waiting for this project to be on board because we need the water. So it was like a miracle. I received a delegation from the world, they didn't believe, they have this letter signed by the 3 parties, and now with the implementation. When I was a secretary, I tackled things in different issues other than, this is when I tell you, sometimes you have women in a position they can be better than men. This is the real thing, and most of the directors were women, and I also depend on them. I'm very proud of having them. In the ministry, for the first time when I was there, I established the Highland Water Forum, where we have all the stakeholders, because we have the problem of water and everybody should be on board. We have everybody there, and it was, as a woman, they used to threaten me. You cannot talk with farmers, you know, they're dangerous. You know, this stereotype of women, they are sensitive, they are weak, you know, these things. So when I start talking, I have to talk and with the farmers. The minister said, be careful, they are very dangerous. I told him, no, this is our problem. It is with the wells there because of the illegal wells. This is our problem. We have to go to them. In the beginning, it was difficult because there is no trust with the government. Then we have the farmers. He doesn't know anything. Start talking about water management. So this is the thing that I did, which is nobody before, because not because I'm very sure, and all women, if they give the chance, look, they have the management in their house. They raise their kids. Whenever you have a very intelligent, good leader, his mom is the one who raised him. We have to acknowledge this. We have to acknowledge the role of the mother, to acknowledge the role of the teacher. They're very devoted, and if they believe in something, they will be very devoted. And this is the thing. A lot of stories with the women. We have a lot of women with very success story. I'm not also, again, it is not the way. I'm not a feminist. I'm with equality. Why not with equal chance, with giving chance to them? If they are good, some of them, not all of the women, like you said, not all the women are interested. They don't want to work. None, we have these cases. But this is why when we have this study with Natasha, we go to them and we ask them why you love this, why do you want to continue, or you prefer to do homework. It is the things. But yeah, this woman, we have this type of woman, but not all of them. As far the idea is equal opportunity to both of them. They have to compete. If I have a good woman as water minister, why should I stop hiring her because she's a woman? Why? This is the thing that we want to reach. It takes time. The idea with stereotype, the idea with culture, but again, yes, working from the ground is very good. Having this that's why our initiative, it is not a public initiative. It's not from the government. It is we choose a good role woman, and they are devoted to the water issue, and they believe in our case. And we start, and now we are growing. The same thing with the Blue Peace Middle East. We start with the small number of people, and then even country now, they contacted us. The same with our initiative. We started 3 countries like Palestine, Jordan, and Lebanon. Now we have Egypt and Morocco, and we are receiving requests from other countries to join. But the idea, yes, it is not the thing with the number. It is the thing with the quality and the things that you can do. It's we have to tackle every track and then continue and to reach our goal. But again, we have you as a donor. I encourage you to work hard on track 1 and 2 and 3 or 1.5. It's not 1. 1 is there and it's always there. So try by your program, your talk with the government. Why not to start having scientists? Why we have a science diplomacy? Why not to have to encourage science diplomacy? Because we have a problem with the scientists, with the decision maker. They don't understand each other. So why to invest more in science diplomacy? So you will see the scientists. You will.
Oh, somehow you got muted, Maysoon.
I don't know what that. So this is the thing we should focus on. So then we will have the evidence-based decision. We have everybody on board. If you talk with others, too many ideas, why not? Why to have just yours? But this is the thing I encourage you. I don't want, maybe I will start my second and maybe take time. Sorry, I would love to continue with you. Very happy to be with you and to participate in any similar event. If you find me, if you want to invite me, I'm happy to join. And I wish you, all of you, good luck, and we're happy to see women everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maysoon. We will certainly be in touch. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Natasha, I wanted to turn back to you. The study that you produced is really extraordinary and very helpful and insightful, and gives good sort of a good baseline of sort of understanding what's going on in the region and the dynamics. The Middle East is a very diverse region, and I think that was reflected in your study. I wonder if you could share some of the examples of diversity that came out of this in the study, and as you think through the next steps, how do you think initiatives can be shaped to address the regional needs as well as the country and subnational level needs? Perhaps there are examples of initiatives right now that you could point to as having some success in that regard.
Okay, let's start with, the easy question.
Is that too many questions in one? Sorry.
well, the easy question is basically, the examples of differences. It's true that the region is very mosaic, and the first mapping was based on the Levant. So we all know that the characteristics of the Levant among the Levant countries are more similar, and so when we did the first mapping, there weren't like really major differences between Lebanon, Palestine, and Jordan. But when we included the other two characteristics of the MENA region, when we included the Maghreb countries and we included the Nile Basin, then we started to see that even the initiative for the empowerment of women in water diplomacy, it has to be done at different levels, or there are different entry points. One example, for example, is the part that I didn't have time to share, but one of the areas of the comparative analysis was based on the definition of water diplomacy. So what does water diplomacy mean to you? And how do you consider it? Is it a tool? Is it a tool for dialogue? Is it a tool for resolving conflict? Is it effective? Is it ineffective? And there we can really see that the perception of what water diplomacy is and the role that it might have on daily life is completely different. For example, in Morocco, water diplomacy is viewed within the cooperation that exists between sectors, between communities. It does not go beyond the national boundaries. So there, the whole dialogue with the women there was based on water diplomacy between, at the national level. Then, for example, the respondents from Jordan, even the definition of water diplomacy and the experience of these practitioners was very much related to the political context. So, the respondents in Jordan considered that basically the water diplomacy is one of the effective tools, for dialogue between states, and that was, partly influenced by the bilateral agreement between Jordan and Israel, through the Joint Water Committee, through the Red Dead, through Maysoon and her colleagues, and what they've experienced on the positive side of water diplomacy. If we go, to the right across, if we go, to the Palestinian respondents, although some of them, have considered that it was effective, but there were many that considered that water diplomacy was ineffective, and that was a reflection, of the experience of the practitioners within, again, the bilateral Joint Water Committee, and the fact that there isn't a bilateral agreement per se, that there's a water allocation, agreement, but not similar to the one between Israel and Jordan. So these differences, are very important in going forward, in trying to see how can, what kind of skills, of what kind of entry points one could use, to develop these mid-level, career women, with the intention that, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, one or a couple of them, I mean, we are hopeful that, you know, within the next decade, we would be able to see that the women, you know, that are part of this network could possibly, you know, either be water ministers, you know, heads of negotiating teams, ministers of environment, minister of agriculture. So that's one example. I mean, one other example that comes, you know, that quickly, you know, like just comes is the difference, for example, between all 4 countries versus Egypt in terms of the ratio of men to women, you know, at the ministry. And for Egypt was the only country that actually scored very high in terms of this ratio, because there it's not an issue, you know, in terms at the ministry level, it's not really an issue. So it's these kinds of you know, differences, as well as the kind of skills that the country-specific participants recognized as needed. You know, there were countries that felt that, you know, international law was, you know, needed, but maybe not as much as, you know, political guidance. I hope that answers the first question. The second question, remind me, it was more about what kind of initiatives, existing initiatives?
Yeah, existing, or what kind of initiatives, yes, opportunities for interventions that sort of address what came out in the study, whether they're existing or need to be developed.
I mean, there's definitely a lot of, you know, drive. There's a lot of drive in the region. There are a lot of competencies, and there are, you know, a few initiatives that are focusing on women empowerment. The difference is that there's a lot that's been done, you know, at the WASH level, at the community level, in the private sector. When we talk about, you know, empowerment of women in entrepreneurship in the Middle East, I mean, you know, this is quite advanced. The difficulty is, you know, the empowerment in this specific field of water diplomacy. But having said that, given, you know, that there are these initiatives in the region that, you know, that are working towards empowerment of women, then, you know, there could be potential collaborations with these initiatives, with these national women committees, with the aspect, you know, that is more specialized on gender, you know, empowerment or mainstreaming. So, you know, if we consider, you know, whether the outlook is really positive, if the opportunities are there, then they definitely are. It's just a matter of, you know, putting them together. You know, Martina mentioned, you know, the Nile Basin, you know, initiative, and there, you know, there's a lot of room to exchange experiences between the 2 networks, and to exchange experiences and to build upon them. Dalit, you know, she spoke about, you know, she didn't specifically speak about the water. I mean, she spoke generally about the water diplomacy program that EcoPeace is leading. But there again, you know, there has been, you know, discussions also, you know, with the directors in terms of, you know, how could the work that is being done at the community level, how could it, you know, also be, you know, useful for the empowerment in the public sector. I hope that answered your questions.
No, that was great. Thank you, Natasha. It took me a minute to find my mute button. No, thank you. I think that was, those are really good, concrete ideas. Martina, I wanted to come back to you. You touched on the issue of power in your remarks. And I think that's an important topic when we're talking about sort of decision-making positions and who's in them and how do they get there. Can you, so, you know, a question I guess is, so how can external actors be mindful of the power dynamics in their work with local leaders, but also use their engagement to help shift those power dynamics to be more inclusive, but in a way that doesn't, you know, that avoids the unintended consequences?
I think, thank you, Lauren. It is a little bit difficult question because when you're a third party and you're entering a process, you need to know who decides about which issue, who has the mandate to make the ultimate decision, for example, to sign an agreement. So you need to know who is the shadow eminences behind that. And often, I think that's why we have only 3% of female mediators, according to recent UN study, and only 4% of women signatories, because in these old structures, it is so heavily male dominated. And when we look at the water sector, especially in regions affected by water scarcity, when water is a matter of national security, you of course have many other sectors who do have a big say in that and who are also involved. So for external party, if external party has the mandate to facilitate a dialogue, maybe something that leads to a possible agreement, it is very important for them to really know who decides. And I think they're often, and some external party can feel quite limited because then they could be pushed. And you have to also include women, and you have to look into gender issues. And I'm just now not speaking from CV experience, but from the experience of my previous life when I work exclusively with conflict resolution, not in the context of water, because then you're really looking, okay, who can make the decisions in this situation? And we are just trying to bring them together. And then if a donor is asking at the same time, you also have to think of gender issues. In certain very difficult situations, you have to really maneuver it very carefully. And I think then what we need to do, and what's very important, we really need to continuously work with gender training also on the side of the third parties. And that is very important. We need to work with these dialogue facilitators who are often men and help them see how they can include women. What are the good mechanisms? So it doesn't feel it's something externally imposed. How, for example, to suggest that, okay, we need to have more women involved in this process, and not only women who are just put there to tick some box and count the numbers, but really women who actually have a say, and we listen to their perspective. Often, the more voices you have, the more perspective you get. When we do trainings, we often ask, what does water diplomacy mean to you? And as Natasha said, you get the very different definitions. And I think that this is normal because water diplomacy, it's a social science, as I can say. So there is no one exact definition. And it's very important that everybody really sees when they fit in. So I think it is very important that with these processes and working with power, we continuously work on all sides. We also work with the external actors, and we continuously help them understand how the whole process can benefit from inclusivity. It's not something that should be just left at the local actors and a burden on them. So now you have to work with this issue, and it's really something that we dump on you. But it is really something that needs to happen organically, and that really needs to be encouraged like this from all different sides. So I think that the work is really that needs to be done. It needs to be done on all sides.
Thank you, Martina. I agree. Definitely coming from all sides. And speaking of that, let's go back to Dalit. You know, EcoPeace has really excelled in creating an enabling environment to encourage ground up and top down progress and connections and building bridges across communities in a complex environment. I wonder, you know, you mentioned in your remarks that some of the shift in being more focused on including women in EcoPeace's programming was driven somewhat by outside funders, if I'm stating that correctly. You can correct me.
I think both. I think, first of all, insight. I think we as an organization changed a lot internally, and that is then also reflected in our programming. And of course, we respond to the needs that we see, and empowering women is a need in the field. There's no way about that. I think funders created an enabling environment to that. They helped us take it to the next level. As I said, to walk the talk. So we understand the importance, but how do you do it? Because I think, as with other issues that we mentioned here, like water diplomacy, ask people what is gender mainstreaming or what is gender equality, you will get different answers. And even to get some consensus inside the organization on what that means, it is very important. So I think that's where the funders really came in, is to build knowledge create awareness on what can be done, how far can we take this, kind of up the game, and be serious about it, and and not scientific, but at least to really have a data orientation towards it, to set clear targets about it. I think that's where the funders really were helpful. But even not just that, I think also creating the environment in which we could learn from each other as organizations, to create that discourse on what we want to achieve in our own organization, but also as a group, as a network, I think has been really important. So I think, as in many other fields, funders, if they do their job right, they do it in a way in which they provide this extra layer of skill building, capacity building, and some guidance as to how to implement something that is actually needed and organization want to do themselves.
No, that's a really excellent point and well articulated. We have a couple of questions that have come in, and I have not done my job of reminding folks who are watching the program to submit questions to ecsp@wilsoncenter.org. But we do have a couple of questions that have come in. Before we go to those, I'm going to invite Marissa back into the room to ask a question of the panel and kick us off for the broader Q&A.
Thank you so much. I can't put my video on for some reason, but it's okay. You can hear me. Thanks to all the panelists. I learned a lot from all of you. I have a clarifying question to Natasha, and then sort of a general question for everyone. Natasha, with the perception survey, there was you mentioned lack of skills that was mentioned as something that was more of an inhibitor. And so is this something that was more, I guess, a perception, or is it sort of the lack of skills that they think they need, or the skill, or are these skills absolutely a must in the world of water diplomacy? Because I feel like women tend to always feel that they need yet more skills in order to be at the high table. And so it's sort of like the lack of confidence issue did not really come up as much, but then you see it in that answer, if that's the case. And I want to sort of, broaden the question, stretch it out a bit, because Martina, you mentioned, male champions, and there was also the lack of support as another component in the survey that Natasha mentioned. And so how do you bring men to the table to become champions and to create a conducive environment for support in the Middle East? I mean, I'm from the Middle East, so I know there are sociocultural barriers there, but how do you do that? Thank you.
Thank you. Quite a challenging question. But, well, I mean, in terms of skills, I mean, what we mean by skills is any kind of skills that are beyond the technical skills of being, a water engineer, a hydrologist, any of the fields in which these, women are actually working. I mean, if we want to be, like, really honest, I mean, are these additional skills, needed? Do they apply for a male candidate? I mean, Martina mentioned, the issue of, that the idea of, we want to have women who are there not because they're someone's daughter or because they're someone's, niece, or, we want someone who's there because basically they have the capacities. And maybe, for us, one of the factors, one of the main factors that stood, really, like, it was one of the biggest factors for this male to female ratio was a male dominant society. But the approach that we took was, there's nothing basically, we can do. We recognize that any change in a society is a long process, and what we wanted to do is that we wanted to go beyond that. And we said one way of going beyond that is actually, to recognize that today, I mean, We have also diplomats. We have traditional diplomats who are now, trying to gain more skills both in international water law and in the technical aspect of law. Usually in a negotiating team, you will have representatives from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but then you will also have, from the Ministry of Irrigation. And throughout my career, I have actually met young, rising diplomats who have had to actually, develop their own skills, both in terms of international water law, but also in terms of, water resources management and the technicalities of it. And so this, approach was basically, looking at it not just in terms of the women, but being a little bit realistic. And yes, today, as a diplomat, as a water diplomat, you do need to have these different skills because often in the room, you might have, a diplomat from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs without, his colleague from the Ministry of Irrigation. So what do you do when, there are certain aspects that are related, to the principles of international water law? What do you do if it's about, allocations and, you need to be more comprehensive? And it is true that these women, they do feel that you need to actually, work harder, prove yourself more. And it's a fact, and we do all, feel that you need to, have more skills in order to be on the same level. But having said that, I can see the positive note of that. I mean, gaining extra skills, in your career is always, learning an ongoing process. So if, you do self-development and if you acquire more skills, because water diplomacy itself is also evolving. Now, Martina comes, she, in her previous life, she came from the security sector and she's involved in the water sector. And now, for example, with the development of the water peace discourse, there is more need for people that are specialized in the water to understand more the aspects of security and vice versa. So I don't really honestly see that, it's unfair, or I don't see it in its negative sense that women have to acquire these additional skills in order to be able, to be in key decision making positions.
Martina or Dolly, do you want to jump in? Go ahead, Martina.
Yeah, if I may jump in on the male champions and also a little bit adding to what Natasha said, it's really helping everybody who is working with these processes, realizing the potential of women. Negotiation is a lot, for example, about listening. It's about reading the room. And the more diverse actors you bring there, the more you learn about your counterparts. For example, then if you have a women on the team, they will notice something different. They will maybe be able to connect to the counterparts in a different way. They will be able maybe to listen more. They will be able to establish relations in a different way with the counterparts that maybe they can bond over different aspects. So I think that's that way how you can get a stronger negotiation team. So I think helping the male champions realize that they're missing a lot on not engaging women, that it is a big loss to the team that's trying to negotiate on something. So I think that is just very important for them to understand the potential that actually without being inclusive, they are losing. They are not having the best negotiation team they can have. And negotiation, it's a lot about listening. It's a lot about understanding the other side. It's a lot about arriving at some shared knowledge, shared understanding, shared vision. So I think that's why that is very important. And it is important to have diversity, both in terms of sectors, but also diversity, both in terms of gender.
Thank you, Martina.
Yes,
Dalit, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. I think that's exactly it. As an organization that trains in young people in diplomacy, we really see that the part that they are most excited about and really and want to take into their lives are the soft skills, are the skills that are about negotiation, are about listening and about reading between the lines and really and you can say this is feminine, this is male, but this is really it's really important to elevate that, to the same level as you would have with, you know, what is normally considered really important in diplomacy. And another thing that on the champions, as an organization, we progressed to different phases as we try to understand how we could best tackle the issue of gender. And we started, I think, like many organizations, with building programming specifically for women, and understanding that that's not really what works. I mean, you can't put them in a silo and say, let's give them different content than the men. And you have to, you know, you have to see this as one whole. It has to be inclusive. It has to be about gender equality. It has to be about seeing each other and enjoying different benefits and values that we have, and that with the diversity of our perspectives. So really, it's exactly what Natasha and Martin said. I think we are in complete consensus on this. It's a great question.
Natasha?
Yeah, there's something also that that came out in the study, which is quite it was quite unexpected. And one of the factors, basically, that also, you know, scored quite significantly in terms of, you know, the acceptance or rejection of, you know, a higher decision-making position was negative perceptions of women. And so, you know, of course, I mean, it is very important to work with male champions. But during the course of the discussions and the analysis and the mapping, you know, we came to realize that, you know, some of these women were actually, you know, they were lacking support from their, you know, either female colleagues, or basically they were hindered by these negative perceptions about women, you know, in higher decision-making positions, not just from men, but also from women. And when we had, you know, these bilateral discussions with them, it seemed that the perceptions, you know, from women were more, had a deeper effect on them, you know, than the male perceptions. So, you know, the opinion of, let's say, you know, a mother, a sister, you know, a mother-in-law, a neighbor, in terms of what it entails for her, you know, to work longer hours, or to travel, or you know, to be more away from home, were actually a bottleneck, and they were actually very important. It was a very important factor to say, no, I don't think, you know, I want to be promoted to a higher decision-making positions. And I think, you know, in throughout there are male champions in the MENA. There are male champions, and there are, you know, males that believe in the potential of women. I mean, from my personal experience, you know, have been, you know, very encouraged by, you know, male mentors, and, you know, who have actually encouraged me to be where I am today. That is why, you know, like, I feel that it's important, you know, in terms of, you know, gender training, to also ensure that women get support from women when and if one decides, you know, to actually be, you know, to accept a promotion, or to accept a higher decision-making position.
I absolutely agree. I think a close friend and colleague that I really admire once told me that two of the most important things in your professional career are to have a good mentor and to be a good mentor. And I think that's absolutely right. Okay, so we have a couple questions that have come in. Let's see what we can get done in the next 5 minutes. A question from Evan DeWitt at the International Center for Religion and Diplomacy. In such a religiously diverse region, how can religious leaders and actors play a role in water diplomacy and gender inclusivity? So maybe thinking about religious champions in the region. Is there somebody who would like to take that question? I'll give you a minute. Can think of if there's been examples of how they've been engaged, or maybe how they can be engaged, and maybe that's sort of something to be thinking about.
I can speak for Ecopeace again. So Ecopeace has worked a lot with faith leaders of the different religions around, especially the Jordan River. The Jordan River is, as you know, holy to three faiths, and also at the same time the most polluted river in our region. The only river that we have in our region, and also the one that is almost non-existent anymore due to pollution. And faith leaders, we brought them to see with their own eyes what it's like, and not just this little section that is available for baptism and other religious activities. And they've actually been leading voices in trying to change the situation, and we are very thankful for that. We've worked with them to bring public visibility to the issue, to educate, to put pressure on decision makers on all sides to change the situation. And right now we are also working with the private sector a lot to see where we can come in and really push forward sustainable projects. So we really think and see the importance of working with faith leaders. Faith leaders represent a big part of the population. Their voices is very important in messaging and in engaging people and caring about what's happening. So I think in that aspect it's very clear to me. In terms of water diplomacy and women, I really don't know. Maybe Natasha and Martina have some ideas.
Thank you, Dalit. Natasha and Martina, I don't want to, if you don't have, it's okay. We can move on to the next question. It's good. It's a good thing to be thinking about, though. Natasha, go ahead.
Well, I'm sort of more thinking about, is it women and water diplomacy, or is it, water diplomacy, per se? And, I think that, the religious leaders really have, given that, that the region is basically, influenced very much by religion, they have a role in terms of definitely, in terms of the perceptions and the respect, for the right to water and sanitation, and there they have a role. But then again, if I want to relate it more to the water diplomacy, then it's also more of, the positive role that they could have in actually, accepting, agreements, in which basically you have a win-win situation, and being, a part of the process of, having this, public consensus. So I would say that, they would have an advocacy role in that sense. But again, I think on the issue of women and water diplomacy, I think, that's a very good question, and that's something, that I would like to take away with me, and be able to, see how we could also within this initiative give it thought. So thanks, for the person that has, asked the question.
Yeah, great. Thank you. We have just a few minutes left, and I want to make sure that I give you each a minute to say any last comments that you want to leave us with, or questions that you're going to be thinking about as you move forward. But I'd also like you to answer one more question, which is, what advice would you give to young professionals who are moving into this field, or rising in this field, or want to get into the field? And, I think we're talking about women today, but I would, considering that this is we need a sort of comprehensive, holistic, and inclusive approach, I would make it for both women and men, all genders. So why don't we start with you, Martina?
Thank you very much. My advice would be to always listen, and never think that you have all the information. That really is important in any negotiation process, because even when you think you really know everything about the subject, you never know. You never really have all the information, and really realizing that and accepting this, that helps. And then also, continue being positive, and everybody goes through difficult moments sometimes, but then things will always turn around, and it's always good to remain positive. So that I would like to end on this positive note.
Thank you, Martina. Dalit?
Sure. It's a very inspiring question. I would say look beyond your limitations, put on you or that you feel within you, work hard, never give up, keep improving, believe in yourself, and be patient.
Thank
That
you.
would be my recipe.
That's great. And please, if you have any other last comments that you want to make, feel free to.
I just want to thank you and the Wilson Center. Preparing for this panel, I took a deep dive at talking with a lot of people in organizations about how they see their insights on really the effect that program has on women and girls. And I really enjoyed that learning experience. So thank you. Thank you for this opportunity, and Martina and Fisher for meeting you. It's really nice.
Thank you, Dalit. Natasha.
Advice for youth who want to engage in water diplomacy. Be open-minded. Recognize that this is a field that really affects the lives of many people. You have to be willing to put yourself in other people's shoes, and to accept basically that there are principles, global principles that you have to use, whether they work for you and against you. And the most important thing, I think, for youth is one of the key skills in water diplomacy is really to develop the soft skill of the emotional intelligence, really be able to know how to react, and how to be at the table with your own feelings about the particular situation, but also how to be able to propose solutions, that would be good for everyone around the table.
That's great. Thank you. My parting advice would be to find the Natashas, Martinas, and Dalits and Maysoons of the world and follow their work and read their research and reach out to them, and sort of find those mentors in this space to work with. Thank you all so much for such a rich and thoughtful discussion. Thank you for your time today. I want to thank EcoPeace Middle East for co-sponsoring today's event, and Marissa and our Middle East program colleagues for their leadership and partnership. I want to thank our AV team, Treyon and Tracy, for making sure that we're here and that you can hear us and see us, and my colleagues in ECSP, Amanda King and Ratchet Techanet. The recording of today's event will be available on the Wilson Center event page in the next day or so. We'll also be sharing a summary of the discussion on our blog, newsecuritybeat.org, in the next couple of weeks. Again, thank you all so much, and best wishes for the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.